Father, happy Sabbath. Thank you for the beautiful day that we've got, that we all have the opportunity to come here together to praise you. Be with us. Speak through me. Don't let it be me or my words. Amen. All right, so he said my story. First of all, I'm glad that door's open, because if all of a sudden you see a streak, it was me. I can get out. No, seriously, I've spent some time in front of crowds working in the fire world. I was an instructor, so I was up front quite a bit, and usually my introduction was, I'm known for using real flowery speech, so if I offend anybody, feel safe. I won't put any of you through that. God took that away from me to a certain degree. I'm still a little rough around the edges, and expletives still jump out of me once in a while, but through Jesus, it's getting better, all right? All right, so January 8th, 1962, I was born 5.5 weeks premature to a mother who was 5 weeks into being 16 years old. My dad was 4 months into being 18. He had been born or raised as a Nazarene. Mom had no denomination whatsoever. I was born in Walla Walla. So you'd think, being born in Walla Walla, that I would have been born an Adventist, right? Didn't happen that way. Eventually, my auntie was an Adventist, and she started studying with my mom eventually, and I don't remember going to church until I was about 6. Dad worked on the railroad. We bounced. I never lived any place very long. I made friends easily, but I kept them, everybody one step back to my dad. At 8 years old, my dad was left at his grandparents' house because his parents had just had a new baby. So imagine, if you can, a little bit, he was broke. He was broken big time. And so he got married. They had me. And I sensed early on that there was competition for my mother's affection and love. And he'd been picked on as a kid, no mother there to love him. So his whole life didn't feel like he had mother's love. And he had issues with being abandoned. So Dad was angry a good portion of the time. Well, I figured out pretty quickly that if I could just stay busy and become productive, and if there might be something to just kind of stay out of the way, I might not get quite as much wrath that day, because who knows what mood he might be in when he came home from work. So very early, I became quite independent and became an independent thinker. 10 years old, I believe I was. We were living in Eastern Oregon, Hermiston. And we'd moved from Hermiston to Hermiston from Colfax. First grade, I went to 3 schools. Let's just put it that way. I bounced. Pasco, Colfax, Hermiston. Second grade, Mom took a stand. And I remember hearing quite audible disagreements from behind the bedroom door about me going to church school. It was extra money. The 60s and the 70s were what they were, and I remember that first year, if I remember correctly, because I cleaned the schoolroom after school to help pay for my tuition. And it was $25 a month. but 25 bucks at that point in time was obviously, to my dad, it was 25 bucks too much. So, needless to say, my dad and I did not have what you would classify a loving relationship. I feared him. No respect, fear, plain out and out. So at 10, Pastor Roger Heinrich baptized me for the first time. Should I have been baptized? No. Not at all. But I was. And I learned about God. I learned about Jesus. Did I know them? Negative. Not one iota. The only way I knew love was from my mom. And my one set of grandparents. Okay, so we'll fast forward a little bit. That was when I was 10. We went to Alaska in the 70s. A pipeline was beginning to be built, and Dad says, I've always wanted to go to Alaska, let's go. So we loaded up the truck and the 17-foot camper trailer, and Mom and Dad and my sister and I and 2 dogs got in the cab of a 1966 Jeep pickup, and up the Alcan we went, 2,000 miles of gravel road. We spent a year in Fairbanks and then went back home to Hermiston. And that summer, I met this young lady that's my wife now. I was 14. And we became good friends. She turned 15 that summer. And she was 2 grades older than me, and that was so intimidating that there was no way there was going to be any kind of a boyfriend-girlfriend type thing there. I was intimidated. It was too much for me to think about trying to be a boyfriend to a girl that was 2 grades ahead of me, so it was like we were just good, solid friends. 70s came and went. I went to academy for a year. Did the same thing. I went to Gem State my sophomore year, and again, there was a bill. Well, I worked at the Champion Bacon Serve. I don't know how many of you through the Adventist academies that we did have some Champion Bacon Serves that helped students to pay their bills. So, man, I figured out that I could sub. There was people that wouldn't make it to work. They were always looking for subs. And so it came time for quarterlies, and I was failing every class because I wasn't attending them. I was doing all the work, taking all the tests, but I was failed because I wasn't attending. What's the silliness in that? I was still passing, right? You're supposed to go to class? So it was discouraging to me, so I quit, and I went home. And again, I stress, I didn't know God. I didn't know Jesus. I had memory texts that I could quote, and fairly much a decent kid, but as a teenager, as teenagers do, I stumbled down the slippery slopes, experimented with drinking and drugs and you name it. Even though I was going to academy, I went back. It's probably one of the only, well, I wasn't one of the only, but I'll be honest, I drank at academy. I got booze smuggled in. I went to Bible class usually with 2 or 3 shots of Black Velvet behind it. And that's how I attended first period class. They tried to bust me for smoking dope, but they couldn't catch me, so they couldn't expel me for that. It was like I wanted to get in trouble. Something almost wanted to be in trouble. Ended up graduating from Gem State in '81 as the senior class president. I was accused of putting drugs in the water or the juice when they voted, but I didn't do that. I promise. It wasn't part of it. Graduated from Gem State. Shortly after I graduated, I asked my girlfriend to marry me. I was like, and consequently, she was a preacher's kid. So I thought, well, maybe this will help me. You know, even though I didn't know God, God's still trying to get in my heart. And just kept getting closer, and I started analyzing, and I'm going, marry a preacher's daughter. After the way I've been living, I probably should get baptized again. So I did. And Pastor Gunnar Sharin, a neat little Swedish guy, baptized me for the second time in 1982, 10 years later. Still trying. God's still pulling, you know, there's some strings pulling, but I still don't know him. I just don't. I don't know God. I don't know Jesus. I know of them. I believe in them to the core. But there's no relationship. None. Well, we get to within about 4 months of when we're supposed to get married. And church was reserved. Bridesmaids' dresses were being made. Material was bought to make the wedding dress. And I woke up one day and I told her, you got to go back. And consequently, she was living at our house because her and her family had gotten in a big tiff, and I just drove from Eastern Oregon to Twin Falls, Idaho, and picked her up and took her home with me. We had extra rooms in the house. I got up one day and I looked at her and I said, I can't do it. I can't marry you. I'm not what you want. I've been facading here with you, trying to learn about God, and it's not going to work. You do not like anything too much about me. You don't like the music I listen to. You don't like the fact that I like guns. And on and on. I said, so I can see the future. You want lots of children. We'd probably have lots of children, but you're going to divorce my dumb butt because I'm not going to be walking the line that you want me to walk. And so rather than putting us both through that, I'm canceling our wedding. Broke my heart to do it because I didn't want to hurt another human, but it just didn't feel right. Shortly after that, I got the announcement. Things were going not so great, you know. I did go to Walla Walla College for a couple of quarters in that year, in 1982, and the lifestyle still continued. You can find what you want to. The drinking and the smoking and the doing drugs just continued in college. Could find whatever I wanted to at Walla Walla College, which is sad. It truly is. But it was reality. There was something nagging in the back of my head. Well, before too long, my mom tells me, your dad's leaving. I says, okay, what do you mean? Well, we're probably going to end up getting a divorce. And, I went off. It's like, are you kidding me? After 20 years, you know, because I was the kid all through school. You know, we're not supposed to get married young, right? Well, here was a prime example as to why. My parents were the poster children for why we should not get married at a young age. But regardless, they got divorced. So now, even though I wasn't living the lifestyle that I had grown up in, sort of, everything that I had been told to hold sacred is because it didn't fit them any longer, was vapor. Poof. Done. And I looked at them both and I said, well, because I was 20 years old. I mean, here I'd made it to 20, you know. I mean, my mom, there's 16 years between me and my mama. She was my best friend. I said, well, that's great, but if that's the case, if everything you guys have tried to teach me that you can just abandon here, then guess what? I don't need you guys, and I don't need it, and I don't want you guys using me as a go-between in your divorce, and don't use my sister either. And they both just kind of looked at me, because parents do that. It was sad. So the little bit of dabbling in drinking and drugs became a lifestyle at that point. It got much more than experimentation. Somewhere along the line, not sure where, this is hard for me to say, I picked up an addiction to pornography. So, I mean, you name it. There's stories I could tell you guys that would probably make you puke. But one thing led to another, and my parents, the divorce went through. The church turned its back on both of them, as happened sometimes in the early 80s still in our church. And that really solidified that I didn't need church, religion, or God. It's like, my dad didn't love me. How can this God love me? He hasn't shown me that. So the divorce happened. Dad went to Alaska, and for whatever reason, I followed him. And the debauchery continued. Mid-80s hit. Kind of got rough in the Alaskan economy, and hard to find work. And so I loaded up. Step back one step. Around that same time, 82, 83, my best friend in Idaho was going through the same thing. His parents got divorced after like 30 years of marriage. Adventists, multiple children. And so we were kind of kindred spirits. I mean, we had a lot in common. Bad thing to do when things are in the toilet to find another person who is in the toilet. So we ended up being roommates, and in his parents' old house, both parents had moved out and let the kids live in the house. A couple of the kids live in the house. So I moved in with Tim. And we drank and partied and did whatever. And Tim worked, and so did I. But we decided one day, let's go buy a Ouija board. And we did. We went and bought the Ouija board. And we played with the Ouija board for a while. Finally, one day, we looked at each other and said, Tim says, I don't think I want this Ouija board anymore. And I said, well, throw it away. So we threw it away. We'd come home, and it's back in the house. We'd throw it away again. It was back in the house. Finally, we burned it. It didn't come back after that. It did not come back from ashes, but that was the only way we could get rid of that Ouija board. We threw it away multiple times, but the only thing that worked was burning it. So, again, spiraling, right? Down here, not up here, down here. The spiral continued. I bounced there for the first few years in Alaska. I bounced back and forth. I'd go to Alaska for a while. I'd come back to the lower 48 for a while. I'd go back to Alaska, come back. In between that place, sometime I saw who is my wife now, after we hadn't seen each other for just a short period of time, but she was married, had a couple kids, and we saw each other, and that was kind of it. She went back to try to make things work with her husband, and I went back to Alaska again. Got a girlfriend up there. How did that happen? I don't know. Picked her up in a bar, best place. She wasn't old enough to be in the bar, but her aunt was a bartender, and anyway. So December of 86, after the state troopers were looking for me because I had discharged a firearm inside of city limits, inside of a structure. They got there that night. I was already gone. My girlfriend's brother came and rescued me so I wouldn't go to jail. And they hid me out for a few days. And the trooper that had come on the initial call took it upon himself. He was looking for me in his off time. So I just got on a plane and left. Went to Southern California where my mom and my stepdad were. Shortly thereafter, I found out that my girlfriend was pregnant. And she had a 2-year-old son. She had at this point in time, cute little towhead kid. And when it would come time, she did not have him at that point when we first got together. Her husband had the child the majority of the time, and she would get visitation. It broke my heart to see what they went through. So I had moved in with her, and that's how it all started. So it was like, okay, you're pregnant. Well, I guess I better bring you where I am. And so she and the little boy followed me to California a few months later. And not much is different. I mean, it's taken everything I make. I'm working in a rock crushing plant, turning big rocks into little rocks and shoveling rocks all day. And I'll tell you what, you can do a lot of thinking when you're doing nothing but shoveling rocks all day. But none of it was for anything positive. I was still angry. Came time, started being complications with the pregnancy, and ended up having to take her to the hospital, and come to find out she was pregnant with twins. Only one died inside of her. Fetal transfusion, I think is what they called it. And she got toxemia from having a dead child in her and a live one. So she was sick, real sick. And I'm praying, okay? I have no relationship with God, but I'm praying. Praying my lips blue. And it was there's a song out there, I believe, this day and age, has been out for a couple of years by a gentleman called Jelly Roll that says, I only talk to God when I need a favor. Yeah. Guilty. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And both children, she was born, but they said there would be much difficulties, and we agreed that if that was the case. And I watched the second one die. I turned and I looked at the doctor and I said, and this is after she'd been in there trying to deliver the second one, and almost lost her too. I can't remember how much blood she had to have. It was just tremendous, but she almost died as well. She got healed up from that a bit, and I believe we had 2 or 3 miscarriages after that. But after the twins, it was worse. I went from being mad at God to being almost, I guess I could probably honestly say I hated God. Just wasn't working. We lived in a motel for a while with a kitchenette. Took all but about $20 a week of what I was making, but we were making it. Found a little duplex, and we moved into this duplex. And the little boy is now, he's got almost a year older, so he's 3 or 4. And we look at this place and said, yeah, we'll take it. And the kid pipes up and he says, well, we can't live here. So, okay, why? There's already people living here. We can't live here. I said, well, as long as they don't eat much, I don't care if they stick around. So I ignored him. When we moved in. Well, a little unbeknown to us, it was a place that I still don't know. The place has been destroyed since, but it had been a barracks on Camp Pendleton, and who knows what happened there. But I can say that evil resided in this duplex. And I'm not joking when I'm telling you that I could sit on the couch and I could watch as dark gray to black shadows. There was a room between the boys' room and the other duplex that had a door that was nailed shut. They walked right through that door and through our place and out the front door. I watched a procession of black, gray. Couldn't think it was anything other than spirits. It didn't like the front door locked. I could deadbolt the door, and we'd come home, and the door would be hanging wide open. The light would be on. Back door would be open. They did whatever they could to stir up hate and discontent, to break down what little we had left of a family unit. Caused all kinds of strife. We started comparing notes with the person next door who I worked with. His name was Hazard. Go figure. After having lost the twins, I was, like I said, in a very dark spot. And he supplied me with drugs and kept me going. I'd do the work of 2 or 3 guys, and we worked together as a team. And he liked it because we got lots of work done. But this whole spirit thing was going on, and it finally, he had been a biker in a bike gang in his previous life, and he wouldn't even go back to get his things. I went back and got some of his stuff for him. Ended up, we had friends, and they allowed us to go stay with them. We finally decided, okay, we can't live here anymore. We can't live here, it's time to go. We moved, and sort of, we were just staying with them temporarily. My girlfriend, I had married the girl finally after we lost the twins. I've said, well, what more can we go through? You know, we've already been through more than a lot of married folks, so let's get married. Dumb. But we did it anyway, went to a chapel in Riverside, paid the $100, and boom, we were married. Unbeknownst, this whole spirit thing, my wife at that time's younger brother was in the Navy, San Diego, just below our place. Come to find out, he and one of his good friends, who were both in the Navy, would come on weekends off and spend a night with us. Well, unbeknown to us, back in Texas, they had been involved in some kind of satanic stuff. So one of the brothers Corey was trying to get out of it, and Satan, whoever, and he ended up being in a terrible car wreck, almost killed him. So my wife at the time took the boy, and they went to Texas. Well, while she's gone, I decided, okay, I better get our stuff out of that place. So I took a dear friend of mine, and her 2 boys went with me to go get a few items that we decided that we didn't want to leave. We got to and here's a big wake up. I should have I'm in the yard picking up toys and stuff because I want my deposit money back, right? I bend down to grab a stick to throw out of the yard, and that stick turned into a black snake in the front yard, just as I'm just about ready to grab it. It had been a stick, I'm telling you. And I should have went, time out, let's not go in there. My friend wouldn't. I said, don't let the boys come in. Do not let your boys come in here. And I'm moving stuff in and out, and I'm going back to get another handful of whatever, and I turn and I look, and Lori was her name, was transfixed. She was staring, deadpan, dead stare into the room that the young boy was his bedroom. And of course, I get over in front of her, and I mean, eyes are this big. I snap my fingers in front of her, no motion. I clap my hands in front of her, no motion. So I turn and look and see what she's looking at. She's huge silhouette, black. And it has got her transfixed on him, and it's going like this. And trying to draw her into that room. And here again, once again, I'm telling you that I didn't have a relationship with God. But I believed. And when I couldn't get her to break that stare, I looked over at that thing, and I said, Lori, come on. And I said, this is not right. And the next thing I said, I don't remember what else I said, went to say something. I said, well, let's just get out of here. And that huge black spirit came into the living room, and it grabbed a hold of her, picked her up by the shoulders, lifted her off the ground, and shook her like a rag doll. And while he's shaking her, I couldn't do anything else, even though I must have had a part of a mustard seed somewhere in there of faith, because out loud I said, in the name of Jesus, leave her alone. Amen. And he threw her. Unfortunately, I was in the room and I caught her. Lori had been raised in a church. I don't remember which one, but they had quit and not gone to church for years. She is now a member. She became a member immediately after her and her husband and her children started going back to church. Not me. That wasn't enough. There was still, I was angry. I was still so angry with God. Crazy times. After we stayed there in California for just a short period of time. The boy looked at me one day and he said, hey, how come those guys are over there, how come those guys are over there kissing on the park bench and holding hands? Male couple, and at that point in time, this is still in the 80s, and it wasn't everywhere, but it was like, okay, I think it's time for us to leave Southern California. The lifestyle here is much too fast. Kids are starting to ask questions that I'm not prepared to answer. Let's get out of here. So we bundled up and ended up moving to a little town in eastern Oregon called Weston. Still right near Walla Walla, near my grandparents. Little tiny town. It was like couldn't have been but about 150 people in this place. I got a job working dumping corn trucks for $5 an hour. We didn't care. We were happy. The stress of California was gone. Boom. She's pregnant again. High risk pregnancy. So I moved from Weston to Pendleton, Oregon. Rented a house that was within 1.5 miles of the hospital. So there's not going to be any chances here. You're high risk. We're going to be I'm going to be able to drag you to the hospital in a wagon if we need to. Had my firstborn son. A year later, or else 3 days short of a year later, my second son came along. Bam, 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 real quick. We decided, well, it's time to go back to Alaska. So back to Alaska we went. We're now in 90. 92, my first grandparent died. One of my best friends flew for FedEx, and in Wyoming, Colorado area, the right wing and part of the tail of his plane was ripped off by a wind shear, and they figured he was dead before he ever hit the ground. Him and my first grandparent died within days of each other, which again, I'm going, why? At that point in time, I still didn't understand any of it all. And for me, for people just to vanish like that out of nowhere, if God's in control, it doesn't look like anybody's in control here to me. But still fighting, not dealing with all of it so well. 10 years, we'll fast forward here. Ended up in 1997, we moved to a little place called Sutton, Alaska, out from Palmer and Wasilla, where we had bounced multiple houses. And I joined the fire department. My son was in the Boy Scouts, the oldest one, and said, "Dad, they really need help." Meanwhile, I'm commuting 65 miles each way to work every day. And it's like, oh, sure. So now I'm going to become a volunteer firefighter too. Thought about it for a little while and said, how better of a way to show my kids that you can be busy and still be part and give back to the community. So I joined the fire department. Wow, what a wake up. I loved it. It was my niche. I had never known how to communicate with anybody. I was so independent that it was almost sickening. But joining the fire world, I had to learn how to communicate because you don't do too much in structural fire. I joined structural, by the way. Started dealing with that and into that about 3 years, and the wife said, "Well, we want to move." And I said, "Well, who's we?" Her sister was staying with us, and I said, "Well, you guys can move, but I'm staying." And so they did. They moved, and I said, "Well, if that's your choice, then that's how it is." But I have finally found something where I feel like I fit a little bit. So I got divorced in 99. My grandmother died either that year. My favorite grandma, my safe house, was Grandma and Grandpa on my mom's side. The only place I felt safe on the face of the planet. Grandma died. 2 years later, Grandpa died. Grandpa was 87. And, it's like, that's a ripe old age. But, this is both my favorite grandparents. That was in 2000. In 2001, the fall of 2001, I got a phone call, "Your mom's in the hospital." So I get on the plane, I go down and visit Mom. And they can't figure out what's really going on, but they get her back stabilized quite a bit. And she says, well, she's going to go home, tells me, go back to work. So I went back to Alaska. That was in November of 2001. Around April 4th of 2002, I received a phone call from my stepdad. Saying, "Your mother wants to see her baby boy." And I'm going, okay, what's going on? And I get there, and I get on a plane, and of course they tell me how sick she truly is at this point. She had cancer, and I never have been able to remember what kind. I know it was down to the point that it was in her body fluids, and I didn't recognize her. I mean, I could walk up to her bed and slide my hands under her and pick her up and move her. She was living on ice chips. I looked at, I said my highs to Mom and went in the other room and looked at my aunt and my sister, and I said, you guys, she's not alive. She's not living. You guys haven't given her permission to die, have you? And my auntie says, well, I can't do that. And my sister said, well, I can't do it either. And I looked at them both and I said, well, I can. And I went in and I held my mama's hand. I said, Mom, you don't have to fight this no more. You can go. And I could tell. And the only thing I could think of to say was, because I had the knowledge, remember? I went through church school. I had the knowledge. I said, Mama, we're going to see each other again. Amen. And she died 2 days later. And I went back to Alaska, and I started doing some honest soul searching. Not very much, but a little bit. So I started slacking off a little bit. I said, I've been paying attention to the things that are a waste of time, and I've been paying no attention to things that matter. At this point in time, my dad and I, even though he lives in Alaska, I drive by his house. There were times when we worked in the same places of employment, but we didn't speak. Again, not because I had gotten to where I didn't love him, so why should I fake it? Mom died. My youngest son, 4 years later, my youngest son and his girlfriend are going to have a baby. Again, they're nothing but kids. So Devin enters this Earth's atmosphere on September 11th, 2006. Had to have open heart surgery the next day. Had issues. He had the eyes of a little wise old man. He was only with us for 6 weeks, and he left us. So now I had been trying to start doing some positive thinking. Now all of a sudden I'm angry all over again. I was like, God, how can you do this? It was one thing to make me go through it, but you got to do it to my kid? Wow, right? So, what could I do? I was good at drinking and doing drugs and stuff, so that's what I kept doing. 2009 came along. All right, well, back up. That same year, after my grandson died, first grandson, Auntie sent me a Clear Word Bible in the mail. I get a package from my auntie. And a little note in it, hey, Rob, love you, miss you. I know you're having a hard time. Hopefully this can bring you some comfort. And I said, okay, whatever. I set it down, didn't look at it for a little while. One day I said, you know what? I can't hurt. I'll give it a try. I picked that Clear Word Bible up, and I put it in my hand, and it fell open. Where else but Proverbs? And I got sucked into Proverbs, and King Solomon is smacking me about the neck and ears with a staff, I'm telling you. It's like, this was written for me. It's like Proverbs was, this was right up my alley. Where were you when I needed to hear all this stuff? It was always there. But so I really started softening a bit. The drinking was, I drunk myself sober, so to speak. It wasn't cutting it. The whole lifestyle just wasn't working anymore. So I started changing some things, still nothing to do with God. as I said, 2009 came, and I had found a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine that I'd known since I was 7. Her name is Janelle. She now lives in Medford. Unbeknownst to me, her and other friends, including my now wife, Elizabeth, had been praying for me these 25 years plus that I had been swimming in the cesspool of this planet that we live on. Janelle and I found her on, somebody had said, well, have you heard about this Facebook thing? And I said, no, what is it? I had started out with classmates.com, actually. Found a bunch of kids that I'd gone to academy with. And then I said, well, how about this person? Do you know where they are? And they said, no, but this thing called Facebook, there's a lot of them on Facebook. So I joined Facebook. Oh, man, cool. I'm in contact with people I haven't seen for 30 years that I had wondered where they'd gone. And I'm reconnecting with all these people. And unbeknownst to me, Janelle, I made friends with Janelle, found her on Facebook, and I didn't know that Elizabeth was the youth pastor and associate pastor in Medford, and that she was divorced. And the next thing you know, Janelle told Elizabeth that, you got to make friends. You got to contact. You need to call Robbie. And Elizabeth said, no, I don't. She'd already heard, talk about opposite ends of the spectrum. Youth pastor, whatever you wanted to call me. We had friends, and I'm saying, well, so I contacted her. In fact, I called her one night. And it was a Friday night, which didn't mean anything to me anymore. Sabbath had become non-existent. I didn't live by any of what we tried to set as standards. So I called her. And she answered the phone. Hello. She was in Vespers. I call and interrupt her while she's in Vespers, says, hey, I'll call you back. So she did. And we talked quite often. She said, how about if I come and see you? I said, all right, you can come and see me. So, and this is blowing me out of the water, right? Usually the guys go see the girls, yeah? Am I correct? Guys usually make that effort. This woman, after 25 years, is saying, hey, I'll fly up and see you. And she does. Well, little does she know that God was working on my heart, softening me. And 7 days before Elizabeth comes to see me, I quit chewing Copenhagen and I quit drinking. 7 days before. Dumb. Dumb, and dumb. I'd rented a bed and breakfast, so we had separate bedrooms, so we spent a week together. She has no idea that I'm DTing every night, waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, DTing off of alcohol and tobacco. And one thing leads to another, and she discovers that I hadn't been to a dentist in 15 years. Hadn't been to a doctor in probably more than that. She says, well, if we're going to even think about starting a relationship, you are going to have to take care of yourself. She wouldn't let me take her anywhere. She said, we're not leaving this B&B until you sit down right now. And this is after hadn't seen her in 25 years, people. 3 days into our visit, she's making ultimatums. You will make a dentist appointment, and you will make a doctor's appointment, and we're not leaving here until you do so. Wow. Of course, I'm angry. I'm not showing that I'm too angry, but I'm angry. It's like, well, who do you think you are to come in here and tell me, I've seen you for 25 years. Well, the dentist discovered that I had an infection in my jawbones. So they took all my teeth. She made me go. I had to get an umbilical hernia fix that I'd had a second belly button for several years. She made me get that fixed. I mean, this woman's putting me through the ringer. But she brought with her, when she came to see me, a Bible from Janelle. It was a New King James and a Message Bible, side by side. She also brought me a couple of Third Day CDs and some Casting Crown CDs. Now, people, I had no idea there was contemporary Christian music out there. If it wasn't Led Zeppelin or AC/DC or Van Halen, I didn't listen to it, all right? But she came and saw me and spent a week with me. And then she left. We stayed in contact. She personally didn't think anything was going to come from it. I had no idea. I mean, it's like, I kind of thought, well, this is a little far-fetched anyway, don't you think, dummy? Here you are circling the drain, and she's a pastor. What's the chances of that? What's the chances of that working out? I mean, come on, be real. And I've got friends telling me, Robbie, you do know that Elizabeth is a pastor now, right? I said, yeah. I said, but we think we're going to do this. So what, 6 weeks later, approximately, she calls me. She goes, what would you say if I wanted to come and spend a month in Alaska? I said, well, all right. Sure. So she makes the plans, and she goes, but I want to do something else first. We need to start having worship together. I said, okay. And how do you suggest that that's going to work? She said, easy. You have a phone, I have a phone. You call, you go find something to read, and you're going to read to me. We're going to have worship together. Whew. I said, okay. So I go over to my dad and my stepmom's house, which, I haven't darkened the door or had any kind of a conversation about God, Mrs. White, church, nothing for years, if I even stopped at their house. And I said, I need to borrow a Desire of Ages. And my dad looked at me, and he said, what did you say? I said, I need to borrow a Desire of Ages. Okay. Didn't ask any more questions. He went in the other room, and he came out, and he gave me a Desire of Ages. And I read the entire book to Elizabeth over the phone. And I started becoming acquainted with Jesus. All right? This has been a long, drawn-out courtship. I'm talking, this is 2009. But finally, things are starting to break down. I'm reading, and I'm crying, and I'm reading, and I'm crying, and she's sleeping. I'd read her to sleep. I'd listen to the phone, and I could hear her sleep breaths, right? I'd say, hey! And she'd wake up, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so tired. Your reading just putting me to sleep. You're making me relax. So I don't know if she heard any of the Desire of Ages, but Rob read it, and it's speaking to me, you know? So that's, and then she comes back to Alaska. She says, all right, we're talking and thinking about a relationship. And if you're serious about this, then we need to get some pre-marriage counseling. And I went, whoa, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need any counseling. And she said, no, not that kind of counseling, silly. She said, we got to see if we're going to be compatible. So another pastor, a little Spanish-speaking pastor named Rick Cabero, put us through. Have any of you seen the Fireproof movie?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what he used. There's a book that goes with it, and we went through the Fireproof book. And the pastor's telling Elizabeth, you know, he's a nice guy, but I don't know that you two are compatible. Regardless, we went through it, and I'm learning more about me. And we're having worship, and I'm having to, not having to, but, so while she's there for that month, we went through the marriage counseling, and all was good. And I asked her to marry me, and she said no. Actually, she didn't say no. She said, I'm not saying no, but I can't say yes. I said, a definite maybe. She said, well, you haven't met my children. I can't agree to marry someone that my children haven't met and that I don't know. All right. But this is after I'd asked her twice, right? Twice or three times. I do believe she denied me 3 times. No, but I wasn't giving up, man. After 25 years, come on. I'm starting to soften. She's accepting of me. And she brings me to Oregon, middle of fire season, which I take a week off in fire season because I had transitioned from structure fire to wildland fire, got a job for the state of Alaska, and this is our season. I mean, if you're a wildland firefighter, you get 1 day off every 21 days, whenever that might fall. And you don't work during the winter, so, you know, you kind of got to make hay while there's hay to make, so to speak. Well, fire season's on, so you put in the hours. That's where the money gets made. Well, everybody's freaking out back at the State of Alaska Division of Forestry, where I work, because Rob's taking time off during the summer. I come to Oregon with Elizabeth. I meet her kids. Her kids look at each other and say, man, this is a really nice guy, and we like him, but he doesn't stand a chance. I go re-meet her parents. I hadn't seen them in 25 or 30 years either, because, I'd known them all way back before in another life, in another galaxy far, far away. And they met me. All was good. And I'm holding off. I'm not going to get told no a 4th time, right? So we go over to Newport before I'm going to go back to Alaska. And I finally said, okay, your kids like me. Your parents like me. Are you going to marry me or what? And she just looked at me. And she finally said yes. And don't get me wrong, I'm softening, okay? I'm praying, and I'm learning, but Jesus still isn't my friend. I'm still holding back. I've still got a lot of stuff going on behind. I got a lot of wheels spinning in the background that nobody sees. Bad habits, the pornography addiction, and it's all there still. But regardless, she said yes. We get married in La Pine in October 2009. Mr. Roger Walters from Vancouver, I'm sure a lot of you all are acquainted with him. Elizabeth and they have been friends for eons. Her kids and their kids, and they're all tight. I'm the outsider here. So Roger married us. We went back to Alaska. We drove to Alaska. For the first time ever, Elizabeth's leaving her children behind. She cried pretty much 2,000 miles from Oregon back to AK. I told her, if we ever make this drive again, I'm buying a stuffed bear, and I'm flying you, because I'll get as much conversation out of a stuffed bear, and the bear will not cry. But we get back up there, and Elizabeth loved AK. She came back to Alaska with me. We lived there happily for right at 4 years. But her dad got sick. We come down to be with him and to help, and before he died, and he looked me in the eye and he says, I need you to promise me something. And I said, what's that? And he says, I need you to promise me that you're going to help Elizabeth take care of my wife. The house next door was for sale, where Elizabeth's parents lived. But I didn't know that. This is in between times, and I'm on a fire assignment in California, and she calls me and says, hey, the house next door to Mom and Dad is for sale, and can I put $500 down on it? I said, if that's what you want to do, sure. So we come down with her dad's last few days, and he hung on. He kept hanging on. He had a will. He was not going to go to sleep in Jesus until he knew that we were going to be there. And until the day we came home with a signed note from the mortgage company, George would not go to sleep. But once he saw that, he was good with it, and he went to sleep in Jesus. So, back up from the time that George died, well, that was in September. Let's back up to January. My bride, who has been 4 years now, she was a social worker, worked with children, abused children, which I'd look her in the face and say, I don't know how you can do that job. If I had to do that job, I would become judge, jury, and executioner all in one, and child abuse would become less. And she just looked at me, let me rant, and her heart. You folks, a lot of you have come to know her heart. But she slipped, taking the mittens out to a child. Feet went up in the air higher than her head was, landed on the back of her noggin, and got a brain injury on the back of her head and on the front, because her brain sloshed in her head so hard that she didn't know who she was. Oh, man. All of a sudden, this little blossom of a Christian experience I'm having is on the line again. It's like, God, how can you do this to me? You bring someone back in my life that I haven't seen for 25 years. You allow me to marry her, and now she's not her. I didn't believe in brain injuries. Oh, yeah, ha, ha, ha. I mean, I got a scar right here in the middle of my head that I got hit with a rock when I was 5 years old that knocked me out, and so I blame it on that. See, I had a brain injury, but I didn't believe in them, right? But it was real. The brain injury thing was real. And I, all of a sudden, had to show, because I'd married her for life, right? Till death do us part. And that was rough, because now all of a sudden the lady that I'm married to isn't the lady that I married, if that makes any sense. Well, so Dad died. Her dad died. We threw our 2 cats and everything that we could get into a Volkswagen Beetle. And down the Alcan we came. Again, she talked a little more on this trip. She's a different person now, right? And we get down here, and it takes the government shut down. I don't know if any of y'all remember in the fall of 2013, everything, they were all fighting, and government was shut down, so our loan was being held up. So we had to live with Mom for 6 weeks until the house got sold. And then spring of 2014 came, February, and I had to go back to work. Training season for firefighters starts in February. And so I left her here. I figured Mom's next door. They could take care of each other. And I went back to work, and I left her. And she struggled, but meanwhile, God's still working on me. Still working on me. I'm trying. Partway in, just a few years in, she comes. I don't think it was even probably a matter of years. It was probably the first year that we were married. Actually, she didn't bring it up the first year. She's very wise. But she comes to me one day and she says, I need to talk to you about something. I said, all right. She goes, I really feel like we need to start paying tithe. And I said, what? Well, I hadn't paid tithe in decades. She said, yeah, we need to pay tithe. And I said, well, let me think about it. I finally said, okay, fine. We'll pay tithe. So we started paying tithe. God kept softening me up a little bit at a time, but I still have no relationship. We didn't go to church regularly. We went a few times up there in Palmer. Our pastor was a young man named Aaron Payne, and we clicked. And then the next thing you know, Aaron's leaving, and it was like, what? How can, no. I'm finally starting to get some interest, and you're going to send the guy away that's starting to talk to me that I'm hearing. I'm feeling this stuff, and you're going to send him away. And he did. And Satan uses what he can, right? So wall came back up. I didn't want to go to church no more. You know, we tried another church, and I'd sit through it, but still, no real true friendship. And this went on. She was here by herself, 2014, till just last year. We'd see each other maybe once a summer, maybe. Other than that, we might be separated the whole 7 months. I continue to soften. My habits are changing. I don't go party with the boys no more. Don't want to. I have no desire to. My language is finally starting to get better. It's picking up. I'm not just the old habits die hard. Last summer, she calls me. She says, I think I have found us a church. I said, all right. What do they say about long hair, earrings, and tattoos? She said, I'll get back to you on that. A little while went by, but she told me about your guys' summer shorts. So while I'm working, and even if I'm at work, I still have a phone that YouTube works on. So I'm trolling on all you guys. All right? And she gets back to me about a week later, and she says, I said, so what'd they say? And she said, well, they said that tattoos and ponytails and earrings are okay with them. And I said, all right, we'll give it a try. And I watched your guys' summer shorts last summer, all summer long. I watched hers. She had convinced me that I should go ahead and go to church up there in Alaska. So I said, all right, I'll give it a try. So God is really starting to work on my heart at this point. And granted, we've been married now for over 10, we've been married for 13 years. And she's so patient. I'm not the same person that she married. I mean, God's softening me and I'm growing, but I still don't have a relationship with him. Oh, man. So she says, well, maybe the next day you have off. And I finally started orchestrating it to where my day 21 would hit on Sabbath. So I said, all right, I'll go to church. I went in and sat down in the Palmer Church all by myself. Really didn't know very many folks there. Songs were going on. And just like here, the Holy Spirit and the presence of God was in the place, and I started crying. And I looked around. Nobody was seeing me crying, and I stood up and I left. And Elizabeth said, well, did you go to church? I said, yes. She goes, well, how'd it go? I said, I don't know. I started crying, so I left. And I'm not going back. I don't like crying in public. I don't know what she thought about all that, and I didn't. I didn't go back to church. It was like, oh, okay, if I'm just going to go there to cry, I can do that at home. I don't need to cry. Kept watching the summer shorts. She came up and spent the last almost month with me before I retired. We got back down here last fall, and you folks, she brought me to church. Middle of October, we got back here. And it was like, I walked in the door, and it was like I was greeted as if I was already a member here. And it's like, I got to go sit down someplace because I'm going to cry. And you all were so warm and so loving. Which, next thing you know, I'm involved in Journey to Bethlehem, and it's like, wait a minute. They don't even know me. I asked Liz, I said, are you sure they want me involved with this? This really can't be. But you guys were so loving, and then we kept coming to church, and the feeling grew. And every week here, I cry every Sabbath. I shed tears every Sabbath here. But they're good tears. And then the pastor announced that he was sick. And I was heartbroken. Because here was someone who was on fire and in love with Jesus. And he was accepting of me, who I was, and now all of a sudden he's sick. And so, man, it's so easy to step on that banana peel and slip, you know, and it was like I wanted to be angry at God all over again. And I started to be, and I pled with God. I said, how can you do this? Every time I find somebody that I click with and I feel like they might be able to help me get to you, you allow a monkey wrench thrown in there. So I was angry all over again. I had this struggle just going on and on. And the pastor keeps smiling, and he keeps preaching and spreading the word. And I can't put an exact minute or day on it. But due to my wife coming and seeing me, this is going to sound corny, but K-Love, Thank God for K-Love. Listening to Lauren Daigle and some of these other new artists today, I was in tears multiple times a day because the music spoke so strongly to my heart. And I don't know what it was that the pastor had to say, but that afterwards, we went home, and Elizabeth didn't even know about it. And I finally said, okay, God, I'm done. I can't fight this anymore. There's so much wrong with me. But those people accept me. And so if they do, and she has, my wife has for the 14 years that we've been married, she's accepted me and loved me and seen that I've been growing, but I'm not where I should be. You can have it all. I said, Jesus, I can't do any of it anymore. You got to take my baggage and take it away from me. And so when I tell you guys that I'm a new convert, whether I had all this knowledge and everything, I truly, truly am. And I can't get enough of it now. She probably wishes that I might go where I couldn't speak out loud once in a while because I'm bombarding her constantly. Why is it like this? Why is this? Why is this? Why is this? And she just keeps telling me, keep reading, keep praying. And if somebody would have told me last year at this time that I would be in front of all of you given that story, I'm so thankful. And you know what? I've lost my dad. Just a footnote. After watching me and me progressing slowly, my dad came to Jesus before I did. Dad quit chewing after having chewed for 45 years when he saw me quit. And I made it down here before he died. Both my parents, I was lucky enough to get on a flight and get down here and make it to be able to say goodbye to them as they rest. But neither one of my parents got to see who I am. They might have known, but they didn't get to see the person, the man that I have become. And due to good friends that have prayed for me all these years, my wife hanging in there when she could have kicked me to the curb. I mean, and she had every right. The whole pornography addiction thing is devastating and so negative to our people. And I guess bottom line is that her love, the love of other friends that continued to pray for me, you folks, and you're welcoming me and loving me and bringing me into this family. And God finally and I communicating and speaking to each other. Nothing else matters. Nothing, and the cares of the world, because I was a worrywart and get hung up on stuff and worry about things that just don't matter. I've been spending a lot of time with this book and questioning my wife and questioning God. And I read 3 or 4 different versions. As much as I love my Clear Word Bible, I'm finding I have to set it aside because I have some things in it that I don't agree with, that don't jive with this one. And that's okay because I still like to read it because there's so much, it still has so much to say to me. And so we do our Bible study, our lesson study out of this one. And then when we're done, I read a little story out of the Clear Word. It's a wonderful way to end the worship. But due to all the love and K-Love, it's a whole different world out there. And I don't, it's not a welcome back. It's a welcome period because I was never here. Even though I was raised and I knew about God and I believed God. But I was, I don't know what you would classify that, because I wasn't hot or cold. I wasn't lukewarm. I was just kind of almost a flatliner, you know. But a few little verses that have helped me get through almost every day. Philippians 4:13, which says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And it's Jesus' strength that has helped me overcome my vices and my negative habits. And I'm so thankful for that. And another one of them is, this was my notes, by the way. I sat down in the middle of the week and I started plotting this because Pastor called me 2 weeks ago and asked me if I would do this. And my wife had already warned me that Pastor was going to call me. And so he asked if I would, and I said, well, yeah. So when through the summer would you like me to do this? And he said, well, I'd like you to do the very first one. Which I'm ready to, you know, I had like 17 different excuses, and they all went away. And a calmness came over me, and I said, I can do it. We can do this. We can do this. So one of my others is Philippians 4:4. What does that say? Huh? I believe unless I wrote it down wrong, I believe it says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. And whenever now, if my wife's having a bad day, or the daughter calls and she's having a bad day, I look at him and I say, rejoice in the Lord always. God is good, people. When is he good? All the time, God is good. And I am so thankful that he did not give up on me. Thank you.